tell us more about what reinsurance is and how does it connect to data?
Reinsurance itself is not much about interacting with policyholders. This is how we call individuals like you, Michael, which actually are purchasing typically insurance, or with SMEs, which are also purchasing insurance. We are more focusing on supporting the large insurance companies and smaller ones on how to deal with the customers. So we give them an understanding about the different risks, how they calculate it, how they work with it. When you have very complex facilities, you do something we call risk engineering. You go out to these facilities, try to find out what can go wrong, what might be the impact, and this needs tons of experts. So if you look into Swiss Re, you will find only very few guys focusing on bringing insurance or reinsurance to our customers, but tons of experts from many, many different areas. So tons of engineers, physicists, mathematicians, which build the brightest models around earthquake, weather, people aging.
So how do you think about the bringing of this information in and the nature of the workplace and where your workplace is evolving?
We are the expert in how to actually work with that data and on methodologies when we talk about bringing in data, but also leveraging the latest technologies when it gets to mathematical models, for example, or how you calculate some weather conditions. Then we have our engineers, physicists, which know this much better than we do. And let me give you a little example. When you get a claim after something happens, then classically you would have somebody typing this from an email into a system. From that system, somebody would review it and put some more information into another system. However, everything you get, you could extract more or less automatically and digitize significant part of the processes, but you need to leverage quite a lot of the capabilities which are slowly emerging in the field. And the same thing is with understanding different risks. There is so much information there which we only use in a very small portion, but the majority of that information is typically unstructured, is unrelated, meaning it comes from very different sources. You need to put it into context, understand it, and no, we do not employ hundreds of thousands of people. We need to do this in an intelligent way. And that's where most of our focus is.
How do you get your workforce to change the way it works to absorb these new ways of thinking about data, analyzing data, absorbing data, making decisions with data?
And this is a huge challenge you're bringing up here, because it's not just about analyzing data. If you think, we have typically experts which are with us for years. So if you walk through Swiss Re, you find a lot of very experienced and settled people. They are confronted with an industry which suddenly changes because it gets more products in there. So for example, new cyber defense product. Then they get a work environment which changes. 10 years ago, they never used kind of iPads to go to customers, putting notes, chatting, interacting in a high frequency with their customer, developing a contract. Then you have suddenly new models of transparency, understanding how your risks are developing, where it's going. And then you have all these new possibilities with data. So all of these things suddenly come together. And we heavily struggle with embarking all of our workforce on the journey by adapting different capabilities offered. And the solution path we take at the moment is try to provide different possibilities and opportunities to them and let them choose to a certain degree. The tries we sometimes had to impose a certain way of working, we fail pretty miserably. We have also a big mantra which is called own the way you work. So people can work at home, on travel, and with that having a much more attractive working environment for them, which at least we get some pretty good feedback on how we are exposing these capabilities to our employees now.
When you talk about the digital workplace or the future of work, it comes down to convincing these experts to adopt new ways of working that enable them to take advantage of the data, the unstructured data, especially that you're able to supply through various types of data feeds and analytic tools.
Yes, that's one part of it. And you could also see it as a very classical adoption problem with latest technologies. And let me perhaps switch to an other industry. If you go to lawyers, especially in their early years, spend tons of time finding the right information somewhere, preparing them, distilling insights out of court case decisions. And there is a small portion which is truly high-end value adding. Sitting with the customers, listening to them, understanding where they are, defining a strategy, how to tackle the legal challenge. And that part of thinking, this value adding probably remains. But the other part I described initially, you can substitute more and more by technology, leaving you on one side with a problem that younger people don't have the possibility to learn and get into it. And for the well-established lawyers, let's think like this. You for sure have a lot of investments in preparing that show. If you would need to run 10 such shows every day and having 5 minutes to prepare it, I'm very sure your life would be pretty stressful.
This type of change that you're talking about must feed into the ultimate thinking of the business model.
Our business model probably evolves much slower than most people would expect when they look at the other areas. However, it gets much more transformed through what is around us. And what is around us means the understanding of the world and how the world is changing. If you look, for example, the kind of risks we have today, they are so much different than the risks we had 20 years ago. This connectiveness of the world changes the whole thing. So we need to understand suddenly the risks much broader, much interconnected. And this asks also us to think, can we offer insurance, for example, more tailored, more short-term, so that you don't get very long coverage, that we also partner more with our primary insurers and bigger customers and also individual customers, that they prevent things more. The digitization shortens the distance from a reinsurance to the ultimate customer significantly. Suddenly we have a chance to get in touch with them, get real handy signals from them, and also shape their behavior, influence them. Because risk management, risk reductions is a lot about influencing and assuring that the things do not happen, which we don't want to happen.
Can you talk about innovation, which I assume also is the kind of glue that holds these various pieces together that you've been describing?
Innovation, in fact, is one of our core paths in the company. And innovation for us doesn't come from a tough, stringent, managed research project. Innovation comes from the entire company. We aim at creating a lot of freedom and invite people to think about different opportunities. So collaboration open problem sharing discussions are at the core. You could even say that certain kind of more edgy working environments which some tech companies have were or are not new to us, since we try to foster such kind of exchanges. And when we then look into the individual activities and how they work, then very often during a lunch talk or during a discussion with a primary insurer, we come to the idea, oh, we could or should, and try out something. And with our expertise, we typically then are able to grow these things. Most technologies will transform the way we look at the world. Or in other words, the change of the world itself is for us the transforming factor. With IoT, we will get more and more insights about how the things are working. With this, we understand risks much better, can influence them more closer. Mobility, or how I would call it connectiveness, allows us to stay in touch with whatever is out there. Digital payments is especially interesting from my perspective, two areas. One is when you get more to insurance as a service on the go, so pay as you drive, pay as you live, then you need to have very small payments to capture the respective insurance. So electronic ways, new digital payments enable that. On the other side, micro payments, small payment possibilities are also the key to open up insurance solution to areas on the world which had very limited access to insurance. So if you think about Africa, how can you provide micro insurance to farmers